Real estate collapse, small and medium-sized banks near default. China's epidemic can't be hidden, officials rarely admit to new death cases. China oil tank truck incident escalates, investigative journalist missing, personal Weibo account cancelled. U.S. experts, CCP remotely controls party members in the US, using them as pawns in political warfare. It's all covered in today's China Truths. Real estate collapse, small and medium-sized banks near default. As previously reported, the recent act of taking her own life by a female employee at China International Capital Corporation, CICC, has sent shockwaves across mainland China. This incident has raised fresh concerns about the state of China's economy, with the ongoing slump in the real estate market threatening to trigger a severe financial crisis that could cripple the entire economy. In more detail, during an interview on NTD-TV's Elite Forum, independent TV producer Li Jun mentioned that the CICC employee, around 30 years old and a master's degree holder from Zhejiang University, earned at least 600,000 yuan annually, approximately $83,000. In September of the previous year, she acquired a luxurious property in Shanghai costing approximately 16 million yuan, about $2.2 million USD, with an initial down payment of 5 million yuan, about $688,300, and a mortgage of over 11 million yuan, about $1.5 million USD, resulting in monthly repayments of about 57,000 yuan, about $7,847. CICC's economic forecast for 2023 had predicted a steady increase in property sales with minor price rises. Convinced by this forecast, she proceeded with the purchase, but shortly thereafter, property prices, particularly in Shanghai, began to drop sharply, presumably obliterating her initial 5 million yuan investment. Concurrently, CICC started to reduce salaries, with reports indicating some positions were cut to 30% of their previous pay. These financial difficulties, compounded by personal issues, drove her to despair, leading her to end her life. Li Jun further remarked that even before this incident, major property developers like Evergrande had been showing signs of distress, with Evergrande filing for bankruptcy in the United States in August 2023 and Country Garden predicting difficulties in August of the prior year. The downturn in the industry was well recognized, characterized by declining sales and dropping prices. The decision to invest in a high-cost property in Shanghai at such a time seemed irrational to many. Additionally, Li noted that property prices are falling throughout China, in both major cities like Beijing and Shanghai and smaller towns facing even tougher challenges. Recent analysis by a self-media source in China revealed that at least 95 cities are experiencing hegemization, a term describing drastic drops in property values. This term comes from a 2019 story about Li Hai from Zhejiang, who bought a house in Hegang, Heilongjiang, for just 58,000 yuan, which was approximately $8,492, based on the exchange rate at that time. The widespread story highlighted the extremely low average price of 2,177 yuan, approximately $319 per square meter in Hegang. This trend of plummeting real estate prices is seen in 25 regions, including major provinces and cities near Beijing. Recent media reports suggest that this pattern of declining property values could become the norm in smaller cities across China, potentially shaping future trends. Real estate collapse, 337 small and medium banks close to failure. Kaien Kuan, a former senior media professional from China now living in the USA, spoke in the Elite Forum about the development of Chinese financial institutions in line with the country's economic growth over the years. He highlighted that this growth, particularly among newly established small and medium-sized banks, is heavily dependent on the real estate sector. The real estate market in China, which has been on a continuous rise for the past several decades, relies fundamentally on financial backing from various banks. As real estate and land prices increased, the banks benefited, seemingly thriving with significant profits and ever-expanding assets annually. However, these appearances are misleading as both large and small banks are vulnerable to risks, leading them into severe debt crises, which are now evident. Kaien Kuan stated that last month, the Chinese Communist Party's central bank identified issues within 337 small and medium-sized banks, designating them as so-called high-risk financial institutions. However, he pointed out that some larger banks of similar nature actually carry a far greater burden of bad debts and non-performing loans compared to these smaller institutions. Small and medium-sized banks have limited ability to make payments, and if problems arise, they could face a bank run, leaving them unable to fulfill their obligations. This could easily lead to social unrest. While state-owned and larger commercial banks have more resources at their disposal and can currently stay afloat by robbing Peter to pay Paul, Kaien Kuan believes that the increasing number of failing real estate companies and the mounting debt of local governments will eventually drag all banks, big and small, into the same debt crisis, resulting in a massive accumulation of non-performing assets. In China, significant real estate crises have been rare, previously localized to small regions like Hainan and Huizhou. Reflecting on Hainan, this brief crisis caused major banks considerable distress, shouldering vast amounts of non-performing assets. Currently, the situation appears grim across China, with an estimated 100 trillion in bad debts within the real estate market, suggesting that as more real estate firms collapse, banking issues will intensify. We know that Chinese banks are currently categorized into various tiers, including the major state-owned banks, which the government is committed to protecting at all costs. These are essentially the government's primary banks. But small and medium-sized enterprises and their corresponding banks are struggling, and while the government wants to prop them up, it's simply unable to. In recent years, many controlling shareholders in these smaller banks have been real estate companies operating behind the scenes, pouring money into the bottomless pit that is the real estate industry. Now, not only is the principal unrecoverable, but many depositors will likely never see their money again. According to Kaien Kuan, if the central government attempts a bailout, it will need to continually pump funds into the system, but he senses that both the People's Bank of China and the Ministry of Finance are stretched thin. Many of these smaller banks are tied to local governments, which lack the funds, strength, and ability to repay the money owed to depositors. It's a growing problem that could easily snowball, leading to a cascade of financial failures down the line. Preparing for war, Chinese social governance fully downgrades. The editor-in-chief of Epoch Times, Guo Jun, said that the Chinese economy faces multifaceted problems. The prevailing term now in China is downgrade, manifesting in consumer behaviors, investment activities, expectations, and even desires. These are all symptoms of economic issues. Yet, these downgrades trace back to the degradation of the management model, essentially a degradation of the political system. A crucial moment was the 19th National Congress of the CCP, which proposed several key initiatives including the modernization of social governance capabilities and the strengthening of the party's comprehensive leadership, not just its leadership, but its complete authoritative control, along with the reinforcement of top-level planning and central authority. These changes signify a downgrade in the CCP's management approach. These modifications demonstrate three primary levels of change, starting with the modernization of social governance capabilities. This involves the complete abolition of rural committee elections, with the village party secretary assuming control. In urban areas, a grid management system is being implemented to establish governmental control agencies more fundamental than street offices. Enhanced digital management measures, including monitoring of bank deposits, consumption patterns, consumer behaviors, and a nationwide surveillance system with facial recognition, have been introduced. All these measures represent the first level, aimed at strengthening control over the populace's behavior, marking a stark reversal from the decentralization and profit-sharing that characterized China's economic reform and opening up. This is considered the first downgrade. The second level involves the strengthening of the party's comprehensive leadership, effectively eliminating the separation between the party and government, returning to a regime where the party dictates governmental actions. This move reverses another cornerstone of post-reform China, the distinct separation of party and government functions, marking it as the second downgrade. The third level is the strengthening of central authority, shifting towards a planned economy. The CCP's current emphasis on top-level design essentially champions a planned economic system, underpinned by the belief that ordinary citizens are incapable of making wise decisions and must rely on a select group of highly intelligent elites to dictate societal directions. This approach reflects the basic ideology of a planned economy, particularly evident within the bureaucratic system where lower levels are discouraged from independent thinking and are expected to follow the directives of their superior leaders. This system of decentralization between central and local governments, another pillar of China's economic reform, has now been fully regressed, representing the third downgrade. Guojun asserts that the CCP system, where administrative power is overwhelmingly dominant and monopolistic, dictates that any degradation within the system inevitably leads to a broader societal downgrade, with economic degradation being just one aspect. She argues that the CCP is incapable of establishing or upgrading to a modern system, leaving Beijing without solutions to current problems. Although the economic and systemic downgrades may not be deliberate choices by Xi Jinping, they align with the CCP's political logic. Xi's political ambitions focus on securing his historical status and the legitimacy of his power, necessitating the unification of Taiwan. This unification implies a shift to a wartime footing, not just against Taiwan but potentially involving the US, requiring a transformation into a war-oriented system. All these downgrades are prerequisites for this war system, demanding strong enforcement of his plans and the support of a faction of leftists within the party to facilitate the implementation of various measures and policies. This faction is unlikely to advocate for liberalized economic policies. China's epidemic can't be hidden, officials rarely admit to new death cases. The epidemic continues to escalate in China, with a growing number of unexpected deaths among both elderly and young populations. On July 10, the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, made a rare disclosure on its website. It reported that from June 1 to June 30, there were 112 newly reported severe cases of COVID-19 and 5 deaths. The report also noted that the number of patients seeking outpatient and clinic treatment for fever fluctuated between 100,000 and 132,000. Additionally, the rate of positive COVID-19 tests increased from 6.2% between June 3 and June 9 to 7.2% between June 24 and June 30. The authorities also submitted 6,275 local cases of successful COVID-19 viral genome sequences, all identified as the Omicron variant, predominantly the JN.1 strain. This acknowledgement of ongoing COVID-19 spread and resulting fatalities has sparked significant public concern. Many mainland netizens have accused the government of consistently concealing the true extent of the pandemic, asserting that the number of deaths from the infection is far higher than the official figures suggest. This skepticism was fueled by the sudden nature of the report, with netizens questioning, what's going on? There were 8 cases in May, 14 in April, 26 in March, 22 in February, and none were reported before. What's prompting this change? Amid these reports, Chinese citizens also disclosed a surge in such unexpected fatalities. Mr. Yu from Guangdong, in an interview with NTD, shared his observations. I keep hearing about people who suddenly die without any apparent reason, including some who were infected. It's particularly surprising to see sudden deaths among the middle-aged and youth. The deaths of athletes have notably highlighted these issues. On June 30, 17-year-old Chinese badminton player Zhang Jijia suddenly collapsed and died during a match in Indonesia, with officials citing a sudden cardiac arrest as the cause, despite resuscitation efforts. Just days later, on July 4, Wang Man, a 42-year-old former coach and captain of the Heilongjiang men's basketball team, also died suddenly under similar circumstances. These consecutive deaths have triggered widespread concern and underscored the ongoing rise in the death toll, affecting people from all walks of life, from ordinary citizens to senior CCP officials. Restrictions imposed by the CCP, including bans on COVID-19 testing in hospitals and prohibitions against doctors linking deaths to the virus, have left many without a clear understanding of the actual causes of these fatalities. Echoing this, Dr. Zhao Xian, a pseudonym from Hunan, told NTD, COVID-19 has been fierce this year, impacting not just the elderly and middle-aged, but young people and children too, with no nucleic acid testing allowed. Another resident, Mr. Luo from Junyi, Guizhou, described the critical situation in hospitals. They are filled beyond capacity, more so than ever before. Some people are being treated, others are not, some die mysteriously without known causes. Funeral services have become alarmingly frequent, with multiple occurrences in a single day. China oil tank truck incident escalates, investigative journalist missing, personal Weibo account cancelled. Han Futao, the investigative reporter for the Beijing News, recently uncovered a scandal involving China's oil tank trucks that were mixing industrial oil with edible oil, causing a public uproar. This report not only captured public attention but also raised concerns about Han's personal safety. Notably, the latest updates suggest that Han Futao's accounts on Weibo and WeChat have been deactivated, and he himself has apparently disappeared. In response to Han Futao's disappearance, a netizen named Daniel Pham commented on Platform X, stating, "If his disappearance is neither sooner nor later, but specifically at this time when his accounts are blocked, this incident is undoubtedly orchestrated and deliberate, with no relation to coincidence or accident." Meanwhile, other netizens expressed concern and hope for Han's safety. Following the exposure of the oil tank truck scandal, which significantly shook public sentiment, the intensifying public outrage prompted the Chinese Communist Party to officially announce an intervention and commence an investigation. Importantly, just as the official investigation was announced, the truck tracking feature on the Chinese freight platform Fawo Bang was unexpectedly removed. The Fawo Bang app declared on July 11, the truck positioning feature is under maintenance for an upgrade. The backend is temporarily unavailable for use and inquiry. Please understand. Once the page functionality is restored, you may use it again. Chinese netizens have sarcastically remarked, "With no tracks, it's as if nothing ever happened," and the vested interest groups have begun to retaliate. In his investigative report, Han Futao exposed that certain oil tank trucks in China were being filled with industrial oil and then loaded with edible oil without cleaning the tanks. This involved major edible oil enterprises such as Huifu Grain and Oil Group and China Grain Reserves Oils and Fats, Tianjin Company, Ltd. As previously reported, on July 10, independent commentator Kaien Kuan posted on Platform X, analyzing that following the revelation of this incident, Deng Yiwu, the chairman of China Storage Grain, also known as Sinagrain, might be at risk of losing his position. Another theory he proposed was that exposing the Sinagrain scandal for maliciously poisoning and attributing the concentrated outbreak of cancer among many Chinese following the vaccine to contaminated edible oil might serve to deflect scrutiny from the personally directed vaccine strategy. Furthermore, Kai suggested that revealing the Sinagrain scandal amidst the breach of Dongting Lake in Hunan, an event that has made Xi Jinping's water management theory a complete mockery, might be an attempt to divert public focus and salvage the situation. U.S. experts, CCP remotely controls party members in the US, using them as pawns in political warfare. According to a report by the Financial Times, as tensions between China and the U.S. increase, the Chinese Communist Party has been tightening its control over young professionals in the U.S. These individuals, who had already joined the CCP before leaving China, are now being asked to remain loyal and actively promote the party's agenda abroad. The Financial Times interviewed 10 CCP members who are either studying or working in the U.S. The demands imposed on them by the CCP include participating in online seminars, promoting a positive image of China in front of their American colleagues, paying membership dues to the Communist Party, studying political materials sent from China, and regularly reporting back to CCP officials to demonstrate their loyalty. In 2019, the CCP Central Committee issued an order mandating that overseas students should contact the party organization at least every 6 months. The following year, the Youth League required 74 million young people, aged between 14 and 28, to routinely report their personal circumstances during their study abroad. Carl Schuster, former operations director at the U.S. Pacific Command's Joint Intelligence Center in Hawaii, told NTD that these measures reflect Xi Jinping's concerns about Chinese people losing faith in the CCP after experiencing Western culture. He highlighted Xi's deep concerns about the public's loyalty, particularly towards him, and noted Xi's acute awareness of the dwindling public confidence in the CCP as the party's rule appears increasingly precarious, especially as they face economic challenges despite past promises of increasing prosperity. The sudden spike in youth unemployment to 30% only adds to these challenges. Schuster also pointed out that another goal of controlling CCP members in the U.S. is to use them as the front line in the CCP's political warfare against Western countries. This involves the implementation of the three warfares strategy, which includes media warfare, psychological warfare, and legal warfare, introduced by the CCP military in December 2003. This strategy is part of the military's educational curriculum, managed by the General Political Department Liaison Department, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the United Front Work Department. Laura Jackson, a seasoned American expert on China, asserted that the three warfares are designed to destabilize international institutions, redraw geopolitical boundaries, and manipulate global narratives, all without firing a single shot. Schuster further added that if the CCP can prevail in the media war and undermine the political resolve of its adversaries, it could take more assertive actions globally once a conflict arises. This strategy could lead to public opposition to war in enemy countries, similar to the U.S. experience during the Vietnam War. He described the CCP members studying and working in the U.S. as vanguard agents for the Chinese government. It is estimated that around 10,000 CCP members are currently in the U.S., a small fraction of the 5.4 million Chinese expatriates. Many of these members are either studying at prestigious universities or occupying significant positions in top-tier companies, posing a considerable risk to the U.S. Schuster emphasized the potential dangers, stating that, consider the information they can gather, from research and development details at universities to sensitive data from their workplaces. In extreme scenarios, they might execute sabotage operations directed by the CCP, as simply as cyber attacks targeting our public utilities. The Financial Times noted that those interviewed had publicly expressed favorable views of China as instructed by the CCP and had concealed their affiliation with the CCP when applying for U.S. study or work visas. Schuster concluded by recommending that these activities be monitored and suggested that participation in Communist Party activities should require registration as a foreign agent. Failure to comply should lead to expulsion. U.S. legislation specifically targets CCP members. The Immigration and Nationality Act prohibits the entry of Communist Party members and affiliates, while the Internal Security Act of 1950 criminalizes conspiracies to establish a totalitarian regime in the U.S. and the illegal handling of classified information. Don't forget to leave a comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us. Make sure to like and subscribe to see more interesting topics from China Truths.